Episode 20, My English Journey, From Beginner to A2. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our English podcast. Today is a very special day. This episode is different from our usual episodes because it is not only another story. It is the end of a journey. For many episodes, we have learned English together. We have talked about daily life, work, travel, books, habits, challenges, fear, confidence, friendship, and personal growth. Today, I want to look back at that journey. I want to remember where we started. I want to talk about what we learned. And most importantly, I want to remind you that progress does not happen in one day. It happens one small step at a time. This is my English journey from beginner to A2. When I first started learning English, I knew only a few words. I could say simple greetings. I could say my name. I could ask someone how they were, but I could not have a long conversation. I couldn't understand most English videos. I couldn't read difficult texts, and I was afraid to speak. When I heard someone speaking English quickly, I felt lost. I knew some words, but I couldn't understand the complete sentence. Sometimes I thought, maybe English is too difficult for me. Maybe you have felt the same way. Maybe you are learning English now, and sometimes you feel that you are not improving. If that is your situation, I want you to remember something. Feeling confused does not mean that you are failing. It means that your brain is learning something new. At the beginning, everything feels difficult, but with practice, difficult things become familiar. The first important lesson I learned was about vocabulary. Words are the building blocks of a language. If you know only a few words, it is difficult to express your ideas. So I started learning new words every day. I didn't try to learn hundreds of words at once. Instead, I learned a small number of useful words. For example, I learned words about family, then food, then work, then travel, then hobbies, then daily activities. I wrote new words in a notebook. I also tried to use each word in a sentence. I discovered that remembering a word is easier when you use it. For example, learning the word improve is useful, but using it in a sentence is better. I want to improve my English. When you use a word many times, it becomes easier to remember. This was one of the most important lessons of my English journey. Don't only memorize words. Use them, read them, listen to them, say them, write them. The next important skill was listening. At first, listening was one of the hardest parts of English for me. I could understand written English better than spoken English. When I read a sentence, I had time to think. But when someone spoke, the words disappeared quickly. Native speakers seem to speak very fast. Sometimes I could recognize one word, then another word, but I couldn't understand the whole idea. So I started listening every day. I listened to podcasts. I watched simple English videos. I listened to short conversations. At first, I understood very little, but I continued. One useful method was listening to the same audio more than once. The first time, I tried to understand the general meaning. The second time, I listened for important words. The third time, I paid attention to pronunciation. After some time, I noticed a change. My ears became more comfortable with English. I started recognizing words faster. I could understand simple sentences without translating every word. That was a small achievement, but it gave me a lot of confidence. Then came speaking. Speaking was probably the skill that made me the most nervous. I was afraid of making mistakes. I worried about my pronunciation. I worried that people would not understand me. I worried that someone might laugh, but eventually I understood something important. Mistakes are normal. Nobody learns a language without making mistakes. Think about children. When children learn their first language, they make many mistakes. They say things incorrectly. They repeat words. They sometimes use the wrong grammar, but they continue speaking. They don't stop because they made one mistake. Language learners should have the same attitude. So I started speaking to myself. I described what I was doing. I am drinking coffee. I am reading a book. I am going to work. The weather is beautiful today. These sentences were simple, but they helped me practice. I also started reading English texts aloud. This helped me connect reading with speaking. Little by little, I became more comfortable. I learned that speaking English is not about being perfect. It is about communicating. If someone understands your idea, you have successfully communicated. Grammar is also important. During my English journey, I learned many basic grammar structures. I learned how to talk about the present. I learned how to talk about the past. I learned how to talk about the future. I learned how to ask questions. I learned how to make negative sentences. I learned how to describe experiences and plans. At first, grammar seemed like a large collection of rules. There were many things to remember. But then I discovered something useful. Grammar becomes easier when you see it in real sentences. For example, instead of only memorizing a grammar rule, I tried to read many examples. I listened to people using the structure. Then I created my own sentences. This helped me understand grammar naturally. Another important part of my journey was reading. Reading gave me something that listening could not always give me. It gave me time. I could stop. I could read the sentence again. I could look at a new word. I could think about the meaning. At first, I read very short texts. Then I started reading simple stories. Later, I read longer articles and books. Every time I finished a text, I felt a little more confident. Reading also taught me something beyond English. It taught me about people. It taught me about different cultures. It gave me new ideas. It helped me understand the world from different perspectives. Writing was another useful skill. I started writing short paragraphs about my day. Sometimes I wrote about my family. Sometimes I wrote about my hobbies. Sometimes I wrote about my plans. My writing was not perfect, but I didn't need it to be perfect. I needed it to improve. I learned that writing helps you notice the gaps in your knowledge. Sometimes you know what you want to say, but you don't know the English word. That is a useful problem, because now you know what you need to learn. One of the biggest changes in my journey was confidence. At the beginning, I thought confidence came before action. I believed that I needed to feel confident before speaking, but I discovered that the opposite is often true. You speak first. You make mistakes. You practice. Then confidence grows. Confidence is built through experience. Every time you do something difficult, you become a little stronger. Every time you speak, even though you are nervous, you become more confident. Every time you understand a sentence that you couldn't understand before, you see your progress. This is why you should never underestimate small achievements. Learning 5 new words is progress. Understanding a podcast is progress. Speaking for 5 minutes is progress. Reading a page without translating every word is progress. Progress doesn't always look big. Sometimes it is very small. But small progress repeated every day becomes something big. Another important lesson I learned was consistency. I discovered that studying for a short time every day is better than studying for many hours only once in a while. You don't need to study English for 5 hours every day. You can start with 15 or 30 minutes. The important thing is to continue. Imagine a person who studies English for 30 minutes every day. After 1 week, that is more than 3 hours. After 1 month, it becomes many hours of practice. After 1 year, the difference can be enormous. The key is consistency, not perfection. Consistency. During this journey, I also learned that learning English should be enjoyable. If you hate every minute of your study time, it will be difficult to continue. So I started connecting English with things I enjoyed. I listened to interesting podcasts. I watched videos about subjects I liked. I read stories. I wrote about my own experiences. I talked about my goals. English became part of my life instead of being only a school subject. And that made learning much easier. Now, after reaching A2, I can understand much more than when I started. I can talk about my daily life. I can describe past experiences. I can talk about my plans. I can explain simple ideas. I can have conversations about familiar topics. But I am still learning. A2 is not the end. It is another step. There are still many words I don't know. There are still grammar structures I need to learn. There are still accents that are difficult for me. There are still conversations that I cannot fully understand. And that's okay. Learning a language is a long journey. The goal is not to know everything. The goal is to keep improving. And now it is time to take the next step. B1. At B1, we will go deeper. We will talk about more complex ideas. We will use longer sentences. We will learn more natural expressions. We will discuss opinions, experiences, problems, goals, relationships, work, education, technology, travel, and many other subjects. But we will not forget the basics. A strong foundation is important. Everything you learn in A1 and A2 will continue to help you. So don't be afraid of the next level. You are ready to grow. Before we finish this part, I want you to remember one final lesson. Don't compare your English with someone else's English. Maybe someone speaks better than you. That's okay. Maybe someone learned faster than you. That's okay. Your journey is different. Compare yourself with the person you were yesterday. If you know more words today, you are improving. If you understand more today, you are improving. If you speak with more confidence today, you are improving. And if you continue tomorrow, you will improve even more. Now, before we finish this journey, I want to talk about something that every English learner needs: patience. Learning English takes time. Sometimes you will study for several days and feel that nothing has changed. You may learn many new words, but forget some of them later. You may practice speaking and still make mistakes. You may listen to an English podcast and understand only half of it. When this happens, don't become disappointed. Learning is not always visible. Sometimes your brain is learning quietly. You may not notice the progress today, but after several weeks or months, you may suddenly understand something that was difficult before. This happened to me many times. I remember listening to an English conversation that I could barely understand. I listened again and again. At first, it sounded like a group of fast sounds, but several months later, I listened to a similar conversation. This time, I understood much more. The English language had not suddenly become slower. I had become a better listener. That is why patience is so important. Don't judge your progress every day. Sometimes you need to look back after several months to see how far you have traveled. Another important lesson is that you don't need expensive tools to learn English. Today, we have access to many free resources. You can listen to podcasts. You can watch educational videos. You can read simple stories. You can practice speaking with yourself. You can write a diary. You can review vocabulary. You can learn from conversations. The most important resource is not an expensive application. It is your consistency. A simple notebook can be useful. A phone can be useful. A book can be useful. But none of these things can learn for you. You must practice. You must listen. You must speak. You must make mistakes. You must continue. Another lesson I learned is that English should become part of your daily life. Don't think of English as something you only study for 30 minutes. Try to use it throughout the day. When you wake up, think of a few English sentences. When you eat breakfast, name the things around you. When you walk outside, describe what you see. When you travel, read signs in English. When you use your phone, listen to an English podcast. When you write a message, try writing a simple sentence in English. These small actions can make a big difference. The more English becomes part of your daily life, the more natural it will feel. You also need to accept that you will forget things. Forgetting is normal. You may learn a word today and forget it next week. That does not mean your study was useless. When you see the word again, your brain will recognize it more quickly. After seeing it several times, you will remember it better. Learning is a process of meeting the same information again and again. That is why repetition is powerful. If you learn a useful sentence, repeat it. Say it aloud. Write it. Use it in another sentence. Listen to it. Then use it again tomorrow. Eventually, it will become part of your active vocabulary. I also want to talk about one of the biggest mistakes English learners make. They wait for perfection. They say, "I will speak when my grammar is perfect. I will speak when I know more vocabulary. I will speak when my pronunciation is perfect." But that day may never come. There will always be something new to learn. Even advanced speakers continue learning. So don't wait. Speak with the English you have today. If you know simple English, use simple English. For example, you don't need a complicated sentence to explain your opinion. You can say, "I think this is a good idea because it can help people." That is clear. That is useful. That is communication. As your English improves, your sentences will become more complex naturally. The important thing is to start. Another thing I want you to remember is this: English is not a competition. You don't need to be better than another learner. You don't need to have perfect pronunciation. You don't need to speak like a native speaker. Your goal is communication and continuous improvement. If you can understand more than you could understand 6 months ago, that's success. If you can speak more comfortably than before, that's success. If you can read a simple book in English, that's success. If you can understand an English podcast without translating every sentence, that's success. Celebrate these achievements. They are proof that your effort is working. Now, let's look at the journey we have completed together. We started with simple English. We learned how to introduce ourselves. We talked about family. We talked about daily routines. We talked about hobbies. We talked about learning English. We talked about work. We talked about travel. We talked about books. We talked about habits. We talked about challenges. We talked about confidence. We talked about fear. We talked about dreams. And throughout all these topics, we practiced English. We listened to stories. We learned vocabulary. We practiced sentences. We answered questions. We built confidence. And now we have reached the end of A2. But remember, the end of A2 is not the end of your English journey. It is the beginning of another chapter. The next chapter will be B1. At B1, you will be able to express yourself in more detail. You will learn how to explain your opinions. You will learn how to tell longer stories. You will learn more natural expressions. You will understand more complicated conversations. You will read longer texts. You will write longer paragraphs. And you will become more independent when using English. The transition may feel difficult at first. That is normal. When you move to a higher level, you may feel like your English has suddenly become worse. It hasn't. The language has simply become more challenging. You are learning new structures and new vocabulary. Give yourself time. Be patient. Keep practicing. One day, the difficult material will become familiar too. I want you to remember the person you were when you started. Maybe you were afraid. Maybe you knew only a few words. Maybe you couldn't understand English conversations. Maybe you didn't believe you could improve. But you continued. You watched another lesson. You listened to another podcast. You learned another word. You practiced another sentence. And now you are here. At the end of A2, you should be proud of yourself. Not because you are perfect, but because you continued. That is the real achievement. Before we say goodbye to this level, I want to give you a small challenge. Don't just listen to this final episode. Use it. Pause the podcast after each question and answer aloud. Question number 1. Why did you start learning English? Try to answer in 3 sentences. Question number 2. What was the most difficult part of learning English for you? Explain why. Question number 3. What English skill has improved the most? Is it listening, speaking, reading, writing? Question number 4. What do you want to achieve at B1? Think about a real goal. Maybe you want to speak English with confidence. Maybe you want to understand movies. Maybe you want to travel. Maybe you want to study. Maybe you want to get a better job. Choose a goal that is meaningful to you. And finally, question number 5. What will you do tomorrow to improve your English? Not next month. Not next year. Tomorrow. Maybe you will listen to an English podcast for 20 minutes. Maybe you will learn 10 new words. Maybe you will read 5 pages. Maybe you will speak English for 10 minutes. Choose one small action, then do it. Because your future English is created by your daily actions. And now, we have reached the end. Thank you. Thank you for listening to these lessons. Thank you for spending your time with me. Thank you for practicing even when English was difficult. Thank you for making mistakes and continuing anyway. I hope this series helped you become more comfortable with English. I hope you learned new words. I hope your listening improved. I hope your speaking became easier. And most importantly, I hope you became more confident. Remember these 5 words: practice, patience, consistency, confidence, progress. You don't need to be perfect. You only need to keep moving forward. One word at a time. One sentence at a time. One conversation at a time. One day at a time. And when you feel that your progress is too slow, look back. Remember where you started. You may be much closer to your goal than you think. A new chapter is waiting for you. A new level, new vocabulary, new conversations, new challenges, new opportunities. B1 is next, so prepare yourself. Keep your notebook. Keep your habits. Keep your curiosity. And most importantly, keep going. This is not goodbye to English. It is only goodbye to A2. Thank you very much for being part of this journey. I am proud of you for reaching this point. Keep learning. Keep practicing. Keep believing in yourself. And I will see you in the next level. B1. Goodbye and see you in the next episode.